special treat. We have the Girl Scout Troop 5203 that will lead us, and 6116 that will help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alana Simmons, thank you so much. Maya Davis. Abigail Levine. Emily Dorito. What you going to write? Ariel? Ariel? Allison Bell? And Karina Carroll. And give them all a round of applause. Thank you so much. That was great. Are there any attendance, Madam Clerk? Are there any attendance changes?
I don't think so, Mr. Miller. No.
And now we have the session part of the council meeting where we ask council members to speak. Any updates, starting with Council Member Patton?
I'll go ahead and start. This Sunday at Seaside Candy is one of the first fundraisers for the fireworks. And I believe there's wine and chocolate involved there. So do you like wine, chocolate?
It's Saturday.
This Saturday. I stand corrected. Did you know the time?
At the same time, 2 to 4,
2
right?
to 5. So if you like wine, you like chocolate, it's a great event. It's going to be a big kickoff for fireworks for the July 4th.
Great. Councilmember Bragg.
Thank you. Today we recognize a birthday. It's a special day in Imperial Beach. And the owner of the Old Plank Inn is not here. He's probably at the Plank celebrating their 129th birthday.
Yeah.
In true Plank tradition, I think they'll be celebrating all week. They may even have some drink specials at $1.29. They do? He said, they do, okay. Well, Al, if you're watching on television at home, happy birthday, and thank you. The Plank has been a tremendous business in the city of Imperial Beach. They've been there through good times, bad times. They've been there when the whole street was under 3 or 4 feet of water one year due to high tides. They've been a tremendous supporter of the Chamber of Commerce and this community. So again, happy birthday to the Plank. I wanted to report on the trolley launch that was held January 27th at the 8th Street Trolley. Myself, our mayor was there as well as many representatives from the trolley system. Also, Captain Zidbeck, who just joined us in the council chambers, was there in attendance. I was glad to see that, and tremendous support from the Chamber of Commerce. The reason why I asked the Chamber of Commerce to be there in attendance, our chamber really does support mass transportation, not only amongst our residents, but our tourists as well. So it was a great event. It was hot, but as the Navy band was there, it was a lovely event. And for the residents of the Blue Line, this was a red letter. I'm going to say it was a blue letter day for the Blue Line, especially for people who are disabled. The offloading getting on and off the trolley now is so much easier for the people on the Blue Line. This really improves the on-time performance, and for mothers with strollers. So this was really a great day for us. I wanted to inform the community that at the January 22nd Executive Board meeting of MTS, I was nominated by Board Member Todd Gloria to serve as the MTS Chairman's alternate to the Transportation Committee at Sandag. That was voted on the 29th. So I am now on the Transportation Committee, which should bode well for the City of Imperial Beach. Later that afternoon, my colleagues Bobby Patton and Patrick Bilbray attended the Sandag retreat, which lasted from the 29th through the 30th. It was an intense 2 days. I just want to touch on the topics briefly that were discussed, obviously focusing on the big picture, which is the infrastructure and regional transportation corridors. It's interesting to note that communities of concern today will become communities of opportunity in the year 2050, and 50% of the population will be living in those communities. Other key sessions included accessibility, which I was glad to see, border issues, transportation of all kinds. And the Google company has a car that is incredible. We will just sit in those cars and they will take us everywhere. And imagine how somebody who is blind or disabled is going to feel about that. Just get in your car and away you go. And we spent an entire day talking about Transnet, the deep dive into Transnet, which is our funding source for our local roads and transportation. So I don't know about you, Mr. Patton, but at the end of the 2.5 days, my head hurt. It was intense, just intense training and education, and it was marvelous. I do want to ask our city clerk, this time of year, our boards and commissions that we serve on, I want to make sure that my colleagues here on the dais also have the roster from MTS, which is the representatives from our community who serves on what committee, and I would like to request that for Sandag as well. So if my colleagues would indulge us, I would appreciate our clerk taking care of that for us. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Matt, the colleagues or everybody up here can also have the agenda that I brought for the next meeting.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday morning I attended the South County Economic Development Council meeting, and there are usually, I'd say, 50 to 70 people there representing the different communities in the South County, as well as a large number of businesses in South County. And I took my turn to speak as an opportunity to talk about the wonderful collaborations we have in Imperial Beach that are developing and growing between the citizens and the city government around our iconic events such as fireworks and Sandcastle, and where a lot of citizens are involved in both of those efforts. And with respect to fireworks, I mentioned the upcoming wine and chocolate fundraiser this Saturday at Seaside Candy, and hopefully a number of those people who are present will take advantage of our wonderful beachside environment to attend that. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Councilor. And thank you all for attending all these meetings. I know it's not always fun, but it's very important that we're there, so thank you for attending Imperial Beach. I just have a couple of announcements. On February 9th, on Monday, I'll be doing the State of the City and Mayoral Community Awards celebration, and I'm honored that we'll be honoring Bill Grove. He's been a volunteer firefighter for 50 years. He started in 1964. Don Spicer of Lightly Little League. Sean Cobb here. Thank you. Sean will be honored. The amazing Ivy Posse is great ambassador. Ivy Posse. and then the IB Women's Club. So that'll start at 6 o'clock at the Boys and Girls Club. That'll be the mayoral community award celebration in the state of the city. Just wanted to let the folks know, Speaker of the Assembly, Tony Atkins, our Assembly member who represents Imperial Beach, will be at the Imperial Beach Library on February 21st at 12:30. She'll also be at a Bayshore cleanup at the end of 7th Street at 11:30 that morning as well. There'll be folks from Mar Vista High School and the Fish and Wildlife Service. They're helping clean up the Bayshore, so that'll be great. And then on March 14th, we're having our return of the Symphony on the Sea, and that'll be the San Diego State Symphony. We'll be playing at 7 o'clock, right, on March 14th. So that'll be really exciting. So anyway, and I'm sorry, 6 o'clock. Okay, now we're going to move on. I'm sorry, City Manager Hall.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is I think we're doing the Taste of IB that same night, and there's some great restaurants in town. In fact, when you guys hired me, I weighed 145 pounds. Great restaurants in here. But no, just want to make sure that those two are linked together. It'd be a great event.
Great, thank you. We move on to the public comment period. Just a clarification and just a comment. We can't, under the Brown Act, which is a state law that regulates how city councils and elected officials communicate with each other, we're not allowed, when you do a public comment in the beginning of the meeting, we're not allowed to respond to your comments. So if you have subsequent comments, we've asked our city manager to note those down and then comment at the end of the public comment period. We're obviously will be taking notes, and we're very interested in what you have to say, but that's a very important point. So folks watching on the video on the internet and also here in person will understand that we look like we should be responding, and the fact is we can't, legally we can't. You have 3 minutes to speak. If you need a little bit more time, just let us know. We welcome your comments, and also for those of you who know about the arcane rules of government and council meetings, we moved from Robert's Rules of Order to Rosenberg's Rules of Order, which are a lot simpler. And the whole point of these meetings is we should communicate clearly and effectively about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So if you have any questions about that, please see us afterwards. But you can look up Rosenberg's Rules of Order on the web. All right, so now we have 3 people who'd like to speak. First is Brenda Lawless. Are you here?
Do I stand here? Go for it? I've never done this
yeah.
before.
I'd just like to say that I have personal knowledge of the Sheriff's Department dysfunctionality. I'm privy to it. At the end of December, the beginning of January, I was in my truck and I housed 3 homeless people in my vehicle. And I oppose that you're not allowed to park here. If you openly ask somebody to be respectful, pick up your trash, not do something that's irresponsible. Normally, if you ask somebody out loud, then if they don't respond, then call the authorities. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So now we have Barbara Preston.
Hello, this is actually somewhat related to the last speaker. I understand that.
Can you please state just
Oh,
state
I'm
your
sorry.
name?
Barbara Preston.
Thank you. Thank you.
I understand that the Imperial Beach Council is going to be voting on City Code 1036-025, which is amend the current code. I just wanted to point out that in the Los Angeles Municipal Code, section 8502 says, no person shall use a vehicle parked or standing upon any city street, upon any parking lot owned by the City of LA and under control of the City of LA or under control of Los Angeles County Department of Beaches and Harbors as living quarters, either overnight, day by day, or otherwise. This is actually very similar wording to the Imperial Beach City Code that says no person shall use a vehicle, including but not limited to recreational vehicles, parked or standing upon any street or alley as temporary or permanent living quarters, abode, or place of habitation, either overnight or day by day. So in the summer of last year, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled the LA law unconstitutional. It was opposed or considered to be too vague and applied with partiality to people who were forced to live on the streets in their vehicles as their only form of shelter. And so while the new amendment sets times and lists examples, whether its purpose here in RB is to discourage residents from living on the streets or having friends or family visit and stay in their RVs, or whether it's to discourage vacationers or the homeless from visiting too long, it's possible that the ordinance is illegal and unconstitutional. So I would encourage the city attorney, if she's not already had a chance to do so, to take a closer look at it.
City Attorney, I want to comment, just to ask you that we can postpone comments on this issue to the actual agenda item, and that be.
Well, it's on consent, so now would be the appropriate time to go ahead and let them comment on it, since it's on consent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Agustin Rojas.
Good evening. I was in Rojas, I live at 832 9th Street. I was here last time talking about the roundabout. I put some video. We have 2 incidents on the 27th. And I took some night visuals so you can see that very poor lighting and the crossing is up from the corners instead of the center. And it also shows the video of the incidents of the vehicles not stopping or pedestrians. Pedestrians has to step out or flag or something. They won't stop for the vehicles. Only one of the 26 incidents I have here, the vehicles stop for the pedestrians. The kids from the school, they cross through the corner like they're used to. We always got taught to go across the street on the corners, and that's the first time we did offset. And the corners have fences that obscure when the vehicles are turning, obscure the view. So that's a bit, you would have to tear down the fences so people have clear view. And it also shows the fact that one incident was clearly in mind. As I was taking a video, this mother and 3 children walked through, and the children, when they stopped it on the crosswalk, they stayed there, and they wouldn't, so they had to go out in the street so the vehicles would stop. And as they stopped, they started crossing, the vehicle stopped, and they started crossing the street. One of the kids just happened to fall behind. So he turned around, and the other kids kept going in the middle of the street, and these vehicles keep coming. So we're putting the public in danger, our kids from school, ourselves, my family, and also on Friday, the 30th, there was an incident where the tires screamed from this one vehicle. He barely stopped in time. There were 2 kids coming to the skateboard across it, and he almost hit them. Like I told you last time. On the opposite street, as these cars empty, it says 35, it says school zone. It should be 25. And so they don't speed up, and it happened. They did hit a girl on the opposite side where they have a crossing. So there was a child hit there. And I went over there, called 911, and they picked up the kid from the middle of the street, and it's putting our kids in danger. The cars don't stop for them. So you have an immediate danger. I will give you 5 copies. Please look at it. It's very dangerous every time, every incident when the people have to walk out. Another one, there was a lady pushing her car with a child in it. Has to be in the middle of the street, going through the stumbling blocks. She made it across. That one had to push a cart in the middle of the street to make the car stop. That's the only evidence that yesterday I went to the drugstore to put in my prescription. As cars kept flying, there was a person said nothing. I stuck my hand up there, stop, when they finally stopped, this lady crossed. So we need some immediate action to take care of that. I will leave this with.
I appreciate it, Mr. Ross, your feedback. Mr. C. Manager, do you have any comments or?
I think that we should probably make sure that if the city council chooses, they may or may not choose. I know we discussed it at some length last time to pool the discussion about the ordinance on whether or not you can habitate in vehicles on the street. Part of the reason that is being amended was in response to the case that was founded in Los Angeles. And we knew that we needed to add some clarity to our code if we were going to continue to have that. There was some question about whether or not this is geared towards people that have family members that are coming to stay for a short period of time or something like that. I think we talked last time, this is really about the situations where you may have people living in their vehicles in front of private residences that don't want them there. And that's where we need to make sure that our ordinance allows people to enjoy property ownership and not have people parked in front of the residences habitating if that's not agreeable to those residents.
Great, thank you.
Mayor, perhaps one other thing, I think the council is aware, we're going to be bringing several suggestions, concerns, ideas about the roundabout to the city council in your meeting in March. That has been scheduled so that we can discuss if there's some modifications, some improvements, and some other things that we can make to make it safer as we go through this trial period of the roundabout.
Great, thank you. Okay, now on to the main part of the, now on to the main part of the meeting, and we're at presentations 1.1 to 1.2, and the first one is recognition of Fire Prevention Week poster contest winners. So I think firefighter Matt Collins is going to come give a presentation.
Mayor Dedina, council members, my name is Matt Collins. This is my partner Will Buchanan. We're both probationary firefighters for Turtle Beach Fire Rescue. We're excited to be here tonight. We're very proud of the students, that everyone that was involved. But tonight's special because we have the actual posters from these students that they worked very hard for, and some plaques to give them. A brief overview of it. October is fire prevention for the nation, all over the nation, and we were able to set up to go to all the different classes for the second grade students at all the different schools here in the city, and they took the information that we taught them and they made a poster out of it. There was over 3,200 people that were killed last year in home fires, so it's an important subject, and we're just extremely proud to be able to give these classes to the kids today. The first student we want to bring up here is from Miss Uribe's class, and it's Mercedes Curry.
From Bayside.
We'd love to get a photo with the firefighters.
Yeah. Just have you line up right here.
Yeah, we'll wave with all the students and the teachers, and then we can get a group photo at the end.
From Bayside, Veronica Hogan.
And then our third is from Mr. Prince. It's going to be Mateus Alford.
And our last student from Imperial Beach Charter School, Ava Hillard.
So if we could have everyone from the fire department, we're going to line up, walk, take a picture with council members and mayor.
All right, it just keeps getting better. All right, this is a really great one as well. Very, very special group. Item 1.2 is a presentation of a proclamation to South Bay Kiwanis in recognition of Kiwanis International's 100th anniversary. Wow. So we have past President Melanie Ellsworth, Lieutenant Governor Denise Jones, and Mark McDonald to join us at the front of the dais, and we'll read the proclamation.
Would it be possible to invite up the other Kiwanians in the room?
I will try to summarize. So we're obviously we know that Kiwanis plays a really, really important role in our community, in our country, and internationally, and we're really honored to read this. I had only become aware that it was the 100th anniversary of Kiwanis when I spoke to Kiwanis just recently. So it's great. It's a really, really important organization with 600,000 members, I think, and raises over $100 million a year for folks in need. So it's great. Whereas the first Kiwanis Club was organized to promote the exchange of business among members. Soon, however, the members were distributing Christmas baskets to the poor. By 1919, the organization determined that community service was the Kiwanis mission. I'm going to summarize this because it goes on, it's a little long. For all the great work that you do, but basically, the permanent objectives of the Kiwanis International are to give primacy to the human and spiritual rather than the material values of life, to encourage the daily living of the Golden Rule, to promote the adoption and application of high social, business, and professional standards, to develop more intelligent, aggressive, and serviceable citizenship, to provide a practical means of forming enduring friendships, rendering altruistic service, and building better communities, and to cooperate in creating and maintaining that sound public opinion and high idealism which make possible the increase of righteousness, justice, patriotism, and goodwill. And whereas the Imperial Beach Kiwanis has conducted successful community efforts such as Project Eliminate, supporting the worldwide effort to support neonatal tetanus. Very good, thank you very much. Vaccinations are very, very important. Imperial Beach Kids Fishing Derby, thank you for that. Recognizing the Imperial Beach Students of the Month, donation of books to elementary schools, general support to the Imperial Beach Boys and Girls Club, support and encouragement to the Key Club at Mar Vista High School, holiday baskets to deserving local families, supporting the Imperial Beach Boys and Girls Club Thanksgiving feast for kids and seniors, providing meals and staffing and events for special athletes, and providing maintenance to yards and exteriors of homes occupied by the elderly. And whereas the Imperial Beach Kiwanis has continuously worked to provide efforts to children's issues and community needs, and to respond to those identified needs and maintaining an active membership, roster of professional business people who have both the desire and ability to serve their community. So we do hereby recognize and congratulate the Imperial Beach Kiwanis Club for all that they do, and what you do is very important. You're an anchor of this community. We really appreciate your support. And your meetings are absolutely awesome. I see more smiles in there. So thank you for doing the great work that you do. So thank you so much.
I was just going to add that it is the 60th anniversary of the Imperial Beach South Bay Kiwanis Club this year also. So, yay. September. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Those are very kind words. Thank you.
Good. Jack needs to be.
Hey, Ed, you want me to take a picture for you?
Just.
Thank you.
I want you right next to council.
Oh, in the back of the van. Oh, I'm thinking I'm a Jew. Let me figure out. Oh, the ceremony.
It was like an all-star IB, 30 minutes, so thank you very much, everybody. Now we move on to the consent calendar, items 2.1 and 2.2. I would like to entertain a motion to approve consent calendar, item number 1, 2.2, and 2.2. Do I have to read these, or just hear?
I'd like to move 2.2 to the end, so we discuss ideology as well as roads as we take the city.
Do I have a second?
Motion carried unanimously.
For what motion?
On 2.2.
So they modifying 2.1 or are they?
Mine's not coming up.
Mr. Mayor, can we have an oral vote, please?
We have an oral vote, please. All in favor?
Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
What consent are you on?
Now we'll go on
we
to,
can't hear
I'm sorry,
you.
we're going to reports.
I'm sorry, just to explain what happened was there were two items on our consent calendar. Item 2.1, which was the warrant register, and item 2.2, which was an ordinance amending the municipal ordinance. There was a first motion to remove item 2.2 and discuss it at the end of the agenda, and then a second motion to approve the warrant register. So, sorry for the confusion, but that was what just happened.
Thank you.
Now we move on to reports, 5.1 to 5.3. First item is 5.1, biannual investment report presented by Chandler Asset Management. Administrative Services Director Bradley will introduce that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have Jason Smith from Chandler Asset Management. He's going to discuss our investment portfolio as well as other economic indicators, which I think is very helpful. He comes twice a year to do that. So, but prior to him coming up, I just wanted to real quick, as you see on your monitor, put some context to what he'll be talking about, because these are some large numbers. On the left hand of the screen is a pie chart, which consists of all our cash and investments, about $31 million. That consists of 24.5 that we have invested through Chandler. We have a working operating capital, checking account at Union Bank, about $2.6 million. We have some bond reserves with Wells Fargo, $2.8 million, and some other funds invested at the local agency investment fund. So all of that makes up $31 million. And as you recall, 2 weeks ago when we had the audit review, if you look at the right side is the fund balances. So that's where these funds and these cash balances belong. So, and we reviewed this 2 weeks ago. But I just want to make sure that we understood that, we don't have $31 million to go out and spend. It's assigned to and designated to these funds per the audit discussion we had 2 weeks ago. So if there's any questions about that, I'm sure I'm certainly available to answer any questions. If not, I'll go ahead and bring Jason up. Okay, Jason, you can use this presentation.
hiring for you. Great. Mayor and council, thank you for inviting me back. This was, I think, the second or third time that I'll be presenting to you your investment portfolio. And I'm really going to start off here on page 3 of the presentation. And just give you some highlights about what's going on in the economy today. Definitely the economy continues to recover. So if you think about it, you have unemployment, which is coming down below 6% now. You have about 250,000 jobs being created nationally. So it's definitely looking up and we continue to recover. With that backdrop, though, we also have a very low inflation rate. That inflation rate is going lower, and I'll cover that a little bit later. But essentially, as the price of oil comes down, we have inflation coming down. So really, where we thought maybe the Federal Reserve may raise rates in 2015, there is more of a risk that they don't raise rates until later on. And the reason being is because there isn't that much inflation in the economy today, and also we have some geopolitical events, not the least of which is really Europe is very weak today as far as their economy, and so we'll continue to monitor that. Looking at the employment report, great, thank you. About 250,000 jobs, like I said before. So the first graph there is just non-farm payroll. Over the last 8 months, it's averaged about 250,000. You can also see the unemployment rate there, basically dropping to that level that we have today at 5.6%. So we continue to see employment strengthening there. On the consumer retail sales year over year, you can see that harsh winter that we had last year. We'll have to see what happens this year. It was pretty harsh back in Boston and things like that. I guess they had to postpone the Super Bowl parade for the New England Patriots because they had 3 feet of snow back east. So we'll have to see how that affects the economy. Also, consumer credit continues to grow. Basically, that's all the credit that's demanded by consumers for furniture and things like that. Looking at some broader measures, single-family housing starts starting to creep up here a little bit. 700,000, definitely a good element. Remember, if we look back just 5 years ago, these numbers really kind of fell off the cliff. We have about 400,000 units, roughly half of that. So continuing to recover. Also, leading economic indicators, this is what's really driving the economy forward. What you really want to look at here is if you have 2 negative numbers over consecutive months. We haven't seen that today. And also, what you can see there, we're at some of those highest points. So the economy continues to be driven along, I would suspect, for the next 6 to 12 months, from around 2 to 2.5% national GDP growth. Looking at manufacturing, Institute of Supply Management, remember here, anything above 50 is an expanding manufacturing sector. Anything below here is contracting. What you can see here is that we've come down a little bit, but definitely below that 50 mark, we continue to expand in the overall economy. Also, capacity utilization continues to grow. In November, the reading was 80%. If you look at that 40-year average, 80.1%, I'd say we're pretty much at the averages today. So manufacturing continues to grow. One interesting thing about manufacturing, if you think about it, it used to add a lot of jobs to the economy as that continued to grow. Anybody been to a factory lately? Not a whole lot of jobs as far as people there. A lot of automation going on there. And so where that would have caused a lot of employment growth in the manufacturing sector, it's more muted this time around since that a lot of automation has created in factories. Looking at the inflation rate, I talked about that a little bit later. CPI, Consumer Price Index, the broadest measure, you can see that coming down to 0.8%. Remember, long-term averages for inflation are about 2.5 to 3%. Reason for that big drop off, we've seen oil come down from about $9 a barrel down to what we have today, which actually sold off about 10% of its value today, about $40 to $45 a barrel today. So that's really translating itself into that lower inflation rate at the same time. Looking at the core side of the equation, basically extracting food and energy, you can also see that that's trending down too, 1.6%. Chances are we'll see that trend down as these lower oil prices make their way into the manufacturing sector, and we'll have lower price increases there. GDP, gross domestic product. This is really all the goods and services really produced within the United States. You can see that first quarter of 2014 was a negative number. That scared a lot of folks. Look at how we've expanded since then. And so for the year of 2014, we're looking at about 2.5% growth over that period of time. So really an economy that really bucked the trend as far as the first quarter of the 2014. With that, yields, you can see yields have risen here. This was as of December. What's happened recently, as we've had some of the issues with Europe, 2-year Treasury notes have actually come down. When I left the office today, at the close, about 50 basis points, which you could earn off of a 2-year Treasury note. Definitely trending up since the last, over the last 2 years, where we saw really the low there of about 20 days over that period. But definitely, that's come down, a lot of that having to do with the lower inflation rate and the expectation in the marketplace that maybe the Fed may need to raise rates, maybe about the second half, and maybe the later half of 2015. Looking at the yield curve here, you can see that the brown line is that of the yield curve as September 30. The green line is that of December of last year. What you can see is a flattening of the yield curve, i.e. that shorter-term rates have remained relatively the same. When you look 10 years out, you can see that yields have come down. Refinancing starting to happen again in the United States. Many people are refinancing their mortgages and things like that. We all would have thought maybe that, given the last interest rate move, that we would have seen refinances again. But remember, we've also seen prices increase. So some of those folks that were unable to refinance their house because they were underwater now have that ability to do so because their house is now fully valued or above that of the loan rate. So now they can also refinance that home. Any questions there? All right, moving on. Looking at your portfolio, your objectives. Remember, it's safety, liquidity, and finally return or yield. The performance benchmark is 1 to 3 year U.S. Treasury notes, and your portfolio buys securities such as U.S. Treasuries, agencies at A-rated or higher quotas. Your portfolio fully complies with your investment policy and California State Code, and you can see that there. Moving on, looking at the characteristics of your portfolio, and I'm going to do that relative to the benchmark as of December 31st. The average maturity of your portfolio is 1.97 versus the benchmark, which was 1.6. The average duration or modified duration was 1.71 versus your portfolio, which was 1.81. Remember, duration is a measure of your portfolio's sensitivity to interest rates. The larger that number, the more sensitive. The lesser that number, the less sensitive. So, but on average, your portfolio matures in about 2 years. You can see the purchase yield is 0.88%, the market yield is 0.75. It's a AA rated portfolio, approximately $25.5 million. And since September 30, you can see that the growth in that portfolio has been approximately $32,000. Looking at the sector allocation, we're really going to focus in on December 31st. So asset-backed securities made up 6.3%. U.S. Treasuries 22%, corporate notes 26%, very small portion in the money market fund. Remember that Doug told us before that a lot of the liquidity is in a checking account, late things like that. So this is really the full invested portion of the portfolio, and agencies are 44.5%. You can see the different issuers that you have here. You can see that the government securities make up the majority of that, from the United States down to its agencies. You can see that JP Morgan Chase is a fairly large position at 8%. That was an inherited security, and so that security has good characteristics. We don't want to sell that security in this marketplace, but when we do find the opportunity and when we find a good price for that security, we will try to reduce that over time. And then you can see the corporate holdings, and what I just want you to take away from here, nothing more than 5% after that JP Morgan note, but Berkshire Hathaway being that largest percentage at 4%. Then you can see the quality of the distribution. You can see that everything's rated above A, except for some not rated securities. Those securities are rated not by S&P, but they're rated by Moody's. So that's really a rated security. And then you can see the duration of the portfolio. Your portfolio is in green as of 12/31 and as of 9/30. You can see that in the tan bars there. What I really want you to take away from here, if you look at 1 year in, you can see that a lot of the portfolio matures at that period of time. If we were to have rising interest rates, we could reinvest the maturities back into that higher interest rate environment, thus looking to increase the earnings, but also looking across the yield curve in order to take advantage of those opportunities to increase the earnings of the portfolio going forward. And then you can see the investment performance here, and you can see that since July 31st, over the last 3 months, we've got 10 basis points versus the benchmark of 0.7 basis points. But if you look at a longer-term perspective, since inception, 1.13 versus 0.8. So really improving your returns over that benchmark by approximately 30 basis points. And then you can see page 21 is just the holdings, and I can answer any questions that you may have on any of the holdings. Any questions? All right, great. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much.
All right.
There was a question. Councilmember Spriggs?
Let's stay on holdings. Going back to your portfolio rating.
Page 18.
Page 18. That's a rating on the portfolio holdings as opposed to the city's creditworthiness, bondworthiness, or that sort of thing.
Right, so these are ratings on the specific securities that you own.
I see. So is there an aggregate that comes out of this, or is it all segmented into different types of security?
There is an aggregate, so if we took a weighted average of that, if we go back to page 15. You can see under the average credit quality that you have a AA rated portfolio. That is the second line from the bottom there, right above the total market value, as of 12/31. And from there, you can see on the S&P side, you have a AA rated portfolio on average, and then on the Moody's side, a AA1 rated portfolio. So very, very high quality portfolio.
Now, is there any relationship at all to this and the city's creditworthiness in terms of if we wanted to go out with a bond issue?
There is some to that in the sense that since you have a very, very high quality portfolio, that is an asset of the city that helps with your overall credit rating. As far as would this really correlate 100% to that? No, it has to do with other things, has to do with the city. Your revenues, what your debt burden is, things like that, what your tax base is. But since this is an asset, a very high quality asset, that's a net positive to your overall credit rating.
Is there anything you can say about our overall credit rating as a municipality? Yeah, that's off, not part of this, I understand, but.
I really wouldn't want to make that, judgment. Definitely, we could take a look at your overall finances and look at that. I wouldn't want to make that judgment or statement there, right?
Any other questions or comments? Great, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Now I'll move on to number 5.2, prioritization of street ends for the Port District's fiscal year 2014 to 2018 capital improvement program, CIP, and Imperial Beach remaining street ends project. And City Attorney Lyon to make an announcement about potential conflict.
Were you going to announce?
Okay. I understand from our city attorney that because my home is located within 500 feet of a couple of the street ends that are being discussed, that I will have to recuse myself from this part of the discussion, so I will do so.
I'll be at your street end surfing tomorrow morning, so I can update you on what we're talking about. And then Assistant City Manager Wade will report on the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Wow.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, there is one thing I wanted to mention before the council just started the discussion. Under the California Code of Regulations 18709, this allows the city council, when a council member has a conflict on an agenda item, if the council is able to segment the discussion so that the council can discuss and vote on the areas that are causing the council member to have a conflict. And if the council ends up taking a final vote as to those issues, then the council member who has a conflict that can return to the discussion. So this is something I just wanted to bring to the council's attention if you wanted to entertain some discussion, and if you're able to essentially eliminate the street ends from the discussion that cause Councilmember Spriggs to have a conflict, then he'll be allowed to come back in. If you can't do that and you need to discuss all of the street ends as part of the discussion, he'll just have to remain recused for the entire discussion. Just wanted to bring this to your attention in case the council wants to consider that option.
Thank you. That has to be after this report is presented, or the report would have to preclude, we have two separate parts of the report?
No, I believe the report can be given all at once right now, and then the council, as soon as you're ready to start discussion, then you can decide whether you want to segment the discussion in such a fashion.
And can you be clear about the street ends? It's in Cano and Descanso?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As mentioned, this item is about the Port Remaining Street End project. On the screen in front of you is the most recent street end project that was completed by the Port District. That's the Palm Avenue street end. By street end, we mean the portions of the street between Seacoast Drive and the beach. Currently, the Port District holds lease agreements for all of the street ends in Imperial Beach, and so they would be improving them as a port Thailand asset if the funding was made available. Back in 2011, 2012, staff was advised that the Port CIP program was beginning. They actually revised their procedure for Port CIPs, and they gave communities, cities, and members of those communities to actually submit applications for Port CIP projects. We went to the council with a whole slew of them and submitted, I believe it was 13 applications, and the following projects were approved in the Port CIP. This is for fiscal years 2014 to 2018. The Imperial Beach tot lot was allocated $100,000. The Imperial Beach remaining street ends, which is the topic of discussion tonight, was allocated $200,000. Both those for fiscal year 2014. And the South Seacoast restroom and shower facility was allocated $75,000. By council action, after allocation of these funds, the Pier South Hotel was under construction, and as part of that project, the Date Avenue street end was to be constructed. There was some redevelopment, former redevelopment agency funds that went towards that street end. However, the cost estimates exceeded that which was provided for the street end by the former redevelopment agency. This city council, therefore, requested that the port reallocate some of these funds. And what ended up happening was that all of the $100,000 for the tot lot, which was in fairly good condition and not needing replacement, that was allocated at Date Avenue, as was $50,000 of the $200,000 for the remaining street ends project. So today, the budget for the remaining street end project stands at $150,000. The remaining street ends project was initiated in fiscal year 2014, and I also wanted to mention that the South Seacoast restroom facility project, which is looking at possible locations and feasibility, that has been initiated, and it will be the topic of a future council discussion. There are 9 remaining street ends, and I'm just going to go through them. Carnation, this is from north to south.
Excuse me, Mr. Wade, Your Honor. So that 75,000 is not part of this 150,000.
That's correct. It's separate money. Moving from north to south, Carnation Avenue, Dahlia Avenue, Elkwood Avenue, Ebony Avenue, Admiralty, that's south of Imperial Beach Boulevard, Beach Avenue, Cortez, Descanso, and Encanto. Encanto is a pedestrian right-of-way. There's no vehicles in that street end. Of those, the 4 that you see on your screen are north of Imperial Beach Boulevard, and that will come into the discussion later. And the rest, the remaining 5, are south of Imperial Beach Boulevard. There are 3 that are shown here, Dahlia, Elkwood, and Ebony, that are within a unique zoning district, and that will also be a topic of discussion. The council may want to use it as a consideration for prioritization. And those 3 are located in the Seacoast Commercial Mixed-Use Zone between Palm Avenue and Imperial Beach Boulevard. To show you, orient you, although I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with where these are, Carnation on the north, Dahlia just south of Palm Avenue, Elkwood, Elder, and then moving south of Ivy Boulevard, you have Admiralty, Beach, Cortez, Descanso, where there's a vehicular emergency access to the beach, and Encanto. The key goals of the project, as identified by the port and in working with staff, and by the way, in your staff report, I found it interesting, a policy was provided by City Clerk Hall to me last week, which was drafted in the early 70s, and the priorities of that policy, which, by the way, we'll be coming back to you with to update that policy. Although it's remarkable how similar the goals of the project and the street ends are as they were back in the 70s. Typically, you're looking at trying to aesthetically improve the street ends while minimizing costs, improving coastal access to the coast, as well as, if possible, providing disability access to the beach. Low impact design, and that's a technical term for stormwater treatment devices that capture, treat, and manage stormwater before it enters into the storm drain system, and low maintenance design elements. Also sustainable design, the possible utilization of recycled materials, using drought tolerant and, more importantly, marine environment tolerant landscaping, providing shoreline protection. As the staff report notes, in early 2000, the Coastal Commission commissioned or paid for a shoreline protection device study of our coast, and it basically summarized that and what it did was look at all the shoreline protection devices on the developed coastline, revetments, seawalls, no protection at all. And the determination of that study was the street ends were the weakest link in our shoreline protection as a city, meaning that because that not all of them had seawalls and some of their revetments were not as replenished as private property, that's where you oftentimes at high storm, high surf, high tide events have coastal flooding episodes. So shoreline protection, obviously those street ends would be a key consideration. Providing lighting, seating, pedestrian amenities such as public art and interpretive signage. And then also minimizing to whatever extent possible existing on-street parking and also providing other mechanisms for transportation by including bicycle racks. So those are the goals that have been identified. Again, there's several others, but that captures the major ones. Some of the considerations that were presented in the staff report that we'd encourage council to look at when deciding which are priorities are adjacent land use, zoning, and pedestrian activity. And by that, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, 3 of the street ends are in a commercial mixed-use zone. It's sort of the tourist area of our city, where Pier Plaza is located, Dunes Park is located, the hotel is located. So there's quite a bit of pedestrian activity in those areas. Obviously, the pier is there as well. More businesses. So it may be that that's a primary consideration where the street ends that are unimproved in that area would be potentially a priority, as that's where the public traffic is. So that's a consideration. In the other areas, north of Palm and south of Ivy Boulevard, those are primarily high-density residential neighborhoods. So that isn't to say that those street ends shouldn't be considered, but the needs of the community adjacent to them, the desire for coastal access, those are considerations the council would want to think about when deciding which we should pursue first. Coastal access, of course, where is it a priority to have or improve coastal access? And that could be a topic combined with the first bullet point. Is it more important to promote and provide that kind of coastal access where more of the tourist and visiting population is, or is there other areas of a particular street end that just doesn't have coastal access? For example, Carnation Avenue, which, by the way, and we'll get into this in a little while, is a almost fully entitled project. It was entitled with the Palm Avenue street end. There's a design in place, and when there is in certain storm and high surf and high tide events, that street end is almost impassable. There's been, within the last several years, storm and surge conditions that have eroded the beach to just revetment, and at that particular street end you have revetment, piling, concrete. There's a dangerous riprap elements next to it, or not riprap, but sheet pile system. And so it may be that the priority should be what points of our street ends need coastal access where others do not. Again, shoreline protection. Is there a priority or a hierarchy of streets that the council feels is a problem to the extent that shoreline protection must be provided? Does the street today present a maintenance concern? In recent high tide events, we've had coastal flooding, for example, down at Descanso. Is that enough of a priority to warrant improving that street and to address that concern? Is it enough of a concern? What kind of impact does it have on the maintenance costs of the city? And then other considerations. One other such consideration would be public safety needs. Is there a significant need for public safety access? Descanso is a public safety access street. Palm Avenue is. It's already improved. Those kinds of considerations. In speaking with our lifeguard captain, staff doesn't feel that is rises to a high level of priority, although public safety is. Those access points exist today. So whether or not a street is improved, that might not be as high a priority, but it is something you can consider. Just taking a sort of visual survey of the street, and by the way, I just want to state for the record, There's a really good project out there. If you've never been on the website, californiacoastline.org, these pictures are from that website. They're typically for governmental purposes, and they're a very useful tool. This is Carnation. This is it in plan view. Obviously, you have Camp Surf here, and then the city here. That's actually the city of Coronado right there. What I wanted to mention is, as I mentioned earlier, there is a plan in place for Carnation. However, it does include, this plan was developed in late 1999, early 2000, and it assumes a 20-foot easement from the Navy, and it's roughly this green area here. This red area is about the width of the current street end. In putting together concepts, the port has come up with a concept that utilizes the existing right-of-way. But as I mentioned, this project was almost fully entitled. It got to the Coastal Commission, and their comment was we needed to address stormwater pollution prevention measures, which at that time was shortly after 9/11. And for that reason, there was the challenge of getting an easement from the Navy at that point in time became a bigger concern. There were also concerns about coastal access to the north, sensitive habitat, and those kinds of things there. But since that time, we just haven't got the funding in place, and the issue of whether or not we could get an easement from the Navy. The Navy has recently expressed a willingness to consider that. However, our understanding is that Navy leases now have a price tag, essentially, that if the Navy is leasing property, it has to receive compensation. That isn't to say we should just summarily reject it, but I wanted to show you the plans just to remind the council that there is an approved design, and whether or not we pursue this is still a matter of discussion. This was on this side of the project proposed a combination of a sound wall, privacy wall for the Camp Surf tents or cabins. And a combination of fencing and landscaping to as a visual screen, and this is what it looks like in plan view, or elevation rather, and this is a landscape architect's rendering of the wall, kind of a wave shape, and then green mesh with a lower wall below it. So that was the plan that's in place, and as they're attached for your review is the concepts that make use of the existing right-of-way. This is Dahlia Avenue. There's some minor improvements in place there today. And the reason I have these images is that if there's any specific questions that council has, we can go back and look at these images and it could be useful. This is Elkwood. There you see the Elkwood parking lot. Some of the improvements done on Seacoast Drive. By the way, you'll see in several of these plank barricades, they were recently, or over the past several years, painted. And the idea was to paint them the colors similar to the lifeguard towers that were painted, the colors of the Surf Henge entryway into Pier Plaza. And that's Elkwood. Ebony, and you can see those ones, that's purple. Admiralty. Beach. Cortez. By the way, these are pretty recent pictures, as you can tell. Descanso, and here you see the access point, vehicular access point. And Encanto, as I mentioned, that's a pedestrian pathway. And this is just the aerial of the as I mentioned, the last street and that was done. So, in conclusion, what we're asking the council is to, if at all possible, come up with a priority. The Port District had started, and as I mentioned, I've got the attachments if you want to see any of the presentation that the Port put together that can be brought up as well too. They provided initial concepts, met with staff, and then it was suggested that we maybe take a step back and decide, okay, we've got this funding, why don't we focus the effort and that funding on the few street ends that would have the best chance for getting designed and constructed, funded and constructed, and that's what we're asking for council's input for on. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I want to also just thank you for the great PowerPoint. I think the staff had worked together on having a common template for your presentation, so it looks great. Thank you. And I love the aerial photos and stuff. Councilmember Patton, you had a question or comment?
Are we going to decide first whether Councilmember Spriggs comes back, or, because I'm not ready to say discount someone in a condo or off the table. That's just myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole point is to have some consensus here, so it's really up to the council to decide what you'd like to just have a discussion now, and then we can decide at another further point when we get to another point about voting or decide. Okay.
I think that it makes procedurally sense to do it that way. There are several street ends. I think, the object of this exercise was to come to consensus on what street end first that we're going to focus on. And then we can decide, and myself as well, Gonzo and Encanto, would certainly wanted to discuss them and see how high up on the priority list they actually percolated.
Okay, with that being said, I do have a few questions. Thank you. So, Mr. Wade, if you would entertain me with questions. So I've been waiting for Carnation, since 1999. Because I knew it was on the table, Carnation. However, and I'll agree with that, the mayor. This is a great presentation, especially with the aerial views and I'm a visual person as well as audio. On Carnation Street, it would get so bad in the wintertime where my Labrador, I wouldn't even allow my dog to jump down there. It was so dangerous. So that's one of my concerns. Another question I have, when we go back, is $150,000. Is that one street?
No, that's to come up with concepts and cost estimates, I believe, feasibility for all the remaining street ends.
For all, okay. So back to Carnation, definitely something would be nice. I think with the Navy and the coastal campus coming soon, that could be an arguing point that we get rid of that mitigation, or maybe something they might be able to do for us, which we're taking 2,000 or 3,000 cars down Palm Avenue daily. So that's just a thought, as well as the Ebony Street End, for future costs. Ebony Street End, we're gonna have a new hotel there, which maybe that could be put in just like the one on Gate Street. I heard a lot of people talk about the one on Gate Street. They were very saddened that they lost their view when mostly beachgoers or surfers would come up and in their car and do a quick surf check, but the wall's too high. That's something we need to be aware of, that when we do any finalization at a later point, that we're not blocking views. Let me go on here. You mentioned parking, lighting, safety, all big concerns of mine. And another big one is access and wheelchair access. And you brought a good point about where most people might use these street ends. So I guess that's what we're going to be narrowing down. But so those are just some of my concerns and some things that maybe you can look into in the future, especially on Carnation Street, the Navy mitigation, as well as the one on Ebony Street. We can't get that somehow built into that hotel at the same time. Thank you.
Actually, a really good point. I hadn't thought about that on Ebony. Councilmember, right?
Thank you. I too have a number of questions, Mr. Wade, and so bear with me. Along with my colleague, as far as Ebony and Admiralty, those are both going to be near the new hotel project. And they were very hot initially on my priority. And it was pointed out to me in some discussions I had with staff, was that maybe we can kind of take a back seat and let potential developer maybe drive that project. Let's wait and see what they have to offer and are willing to pay for it. So then they kind of, now those two on my list have kind of come down a little bit. But one thing to keep in mind about that street end, especially the Imperial Beach Boulevard street end, is that looking to, and Mr. Wade, that is one of the questions that you had asked the council to consider. Was under general questions was, what about the people across the street? Do we want to be looking across the street? So it was a great question because it really made me open my mind up a little bit further, not just be on the west side of the street, but okay, what is on the other side? And what is the other side of the street willing to pay for? And what's their vision? What's their appetite? What does the menu look like? So those were some things that I started thinking about. I actually went through each street end that you have provided to us, and my considerations, just like my colleague has already stated, was I actually was counting, and I don't know if you want to go through those as I'm speaking, Mr. Wade, but was counting the number of parking spaces, and then in our staff report it said, there are ADA stalls, but if you look at it, there's really only one ADA stall. So is that sufficient? And if we're having to meet requirements of ADA, does that have to be at each street end, or can we have designated street ends that maybe have 3 or 4 or 2? I'm not sure how much we want to do that. Mr. Levine is always pointing out that when you install one ADA stall, you're actually using up 2 parking spaces. That's correct, Mr. Levine? Thank you. So as I went through each street, and my considerations were amenities that I would like to see included in them would be trees and seating, and of course ADA access. And then partnering with, has already been pointed out, which was a great point, was the Navy, was Camp Serve. But at one of the street ends, one right after Carnation, was Dahlia. If you look at the very beginning of the street end, you're right there at Seacoast Drive, that's a bus stop. So then now all of a sudden you have another stakeholder, with MTS. And what could they contribute to the beginning of the street end? How much of it do we have to, is their right of way? How much of it is ours? Are we satisfied with the bus stop that they're providing at those street ends? Could they be better lit? Could they have shelters? So to me that opened up a whole other stakeholder. And of course bike racks. And then there's a sculpture there. One of the questions was, could it be moved? Where would we move it to? There's also one at Ivy Boulevard, but that one have to be relocated as well. And then initially too, our question of another consideration too, I thought would be kind of neat to include would be plugins for electrical cars. Is that a consideration that we need to be thinking about? And then in our projects in the funding for 2015, is the $75,000 for a restroom on South Seacoast. And what would that facility look like? Is it just a restroom? Are there showers involved in it? That has been historically something that the community has asked for a long time. And if you think about, if we were envisioning a pedestrian-friendly community and we were inviting that community to start at Palm Avenue and walk all of Seacoast all the way down as far as they could, they might have to use the bathroom by the time they get to the end of that walk. So that's something in the community that we've talked about for a long time. We are at that juncture. Now's the time to be looking at it. As I was looking at these street ends, though, I had this discussion with Mr. Wade. I really got to thinking about things, again, looking from the west side of the street to the east side of the street. The condition of the sidewalks on South Seacoast. We all know if you're a walker, if you're on a stroller, all those, if you're in a wheelchair, they slope, and they slope drastically. So if we're looking at street ends, can we also be looking at it, I don't really want to piecemeal this out, but if we are making those improvements, why aren't we thinking about right across the street as well? And one that came to mind was right there, I think it was Admiralty that we were talking about, talking with the estuary. Is now the time to be thinking about a deck there, a viewing point. So getting all of these ideas in the pot at the same time is certainly, rather than 10 years or 2 years from now, let's do it, let's look at these things now. So those were just some of my ideas. I really got a kick out of the old policy policy back from 1978 was kind of amazing, referred to, Seacoast Drive as First Street. So I wonder when we bring that back to us, we certainly have to change the name of the street. But what was amazing was that the considerations then in 1978 are the same as they are now today in 2015. So even though it's not, a lot has changed, and we're still grappling with those same issues. But I had kind of highlighted my priority street ends, which I think was the purpose of the exercise. I too looked at Carnation Avenue, Ebony and Admiralty. Again, I was at one time they were very high on my list. Putting those down a little bit further so that we can look at the new developer, and then Descanso and Encanto for as far as access for emergency vehicles, and then also considering is that where we'd like to place a restroom facility.
I'm sorry, you want to place a restroom facility in Canto or in the area?
Possibly Descanso or Encanto.
Oh.
I think we definitely need facilities down at the end of South Seacoast. Whether the Port District would support us in something like that. Restrooms are extremely expensive from the get-go. They're extremely expensive to maintain. But I think like I said, it's something that we as a community have talked about for a very long time.
If I could just respond to that last comment. Under the category of other considerations are other capital improvements and capital needs, and as I mentioned, the port has initiated its South Seacoast restroom study, and at this point the focus is on those two street ends. One of the key considerations, much the same as the street end, is trying to accommodate that kind of facility but not lose. Canto seems to be the street end that is sort of taking the top billing, if you will, in that locational kind of criteria or criterion. And I just wanted to bring that up. So that is consideration. If that is where the council and the port believe it should go in the community, does that move that street end up in the priority list in terms of, well, if you're going to do a restroom facility there, maybe it should be one big project?
While it's doing that, maybe I'll add, if I could, Mr. Mayor and Council. The other thing, we have some other, what we're talking about other considerations, we also have some other opportunities like the Seacoast Aesthetic Project that the council has already appropriated money for and whatnot. So yeah, we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of all of our opportunities for leveraging this money to make it go as far as it possibly can. Working with the new developer, using some of our projects, some of these other things, maybe working with the estuary on some of their viewing decks and some of those kinds of things. So absolutely, I think the more comprehensive the project, the better received the street end improvements would be.
Councilmember Bilber, do you have any comments? Or?
Well, I know in Canto, there's all the surfers, they call it the walkway. It's a walkway. I don't really consider that a street. The walkway. You see the walkway right there. However, if the restroom is going to be in that area, and that would be a good place for it to be. But I know from personal experience that I take long walks in the morning or run all the way down there. Many times I'm running faster towards the pier.
Gotta go.
Yeah, I think South Seacoast, I live in the northern area, and the South Seacoast, there's a lot to be said about how nice it is down there. And if you look at the lifeguard towers have been moved down there further and further because more and more people are going down there, especially the new sand. If you go down there, during the summertime, lifeguard towers are much further south, just because the population of people going down there is much, much greater than it was even 5 years ago. But that's a consideration of mine. Thank you.
For the most part, I agree with my colleagues here. I think Carnation should be one of our top priorities. It is a very dangerous area.
And just to know, I have a chart here, and I'm actually trying to mark down so there's any consensus. So it seems like the consensus is Carnation is one.
Ebony, we should definitely have something on the books for, just in case this development ends up going through. Time is a big killer of a lot of these developments, so having something in place. I think this council should definitely be looked at with the flooding issue. Just like Councilmember Patton mentioned, a lot of people have moved south in these past couple of years, and definitely shouldn't overlook the southern end. But for the most part, those would be my 3 priorities.
So, just unclear, Carnation, Descanso, and Encanto?
Descanso and Ebony.
Oh, Ebony, okay, and Descanso, okay. And then Councilmember Bragg, I'm marking X's, so I had you down for Carnation, Descanso, and Encanto, is that right? And then Councilmember Patton, I had you down for Carnation, but I wasn't clear, and I wasn't.
Yeah, I'm more of a Descanso person. True street in.
Right, okay.
With true parking spots and it's a greater area. Yeah, a walkway with some trees and bushes.
Okay.
I'm more.
So right now we have consensus on Carnation and Descanso. Any other comments? Do I hear first of all, I have an emotional attachment with I'm sure like some of you, I know when I met Councilmember Patton, he was an Elm Street guy, and then I actually moved to Elkwood. I hear any votes for Elkwood at all, or any interest in Elkwood, which I think is like maybe one of the ugliest street ends in IB, so I wasn't sure about it. We have 2 kind of consensus streets right now.
Ebony, I could support Ebony as well.
So Ebony. Okay.
I think for the most part, we should consider concentrating most of our resources to the north because of the increase in tourism in that area. But we should also take out one like Descanso for at least doing something in the southern area.
Okay, so I've got 2 council members. Okay, we've got 3 solid Carnation. I'm in agreement with that. That's a mess. Descanso. I can't wait to see all the, if we're going to put that, well, never mind. We all know the kind of people that hang out there. There's some really aggressive non-IB surfers that hang out there, but I think it's great, and it does flood. So I support that. And then, the other, Ebony, you've got 2 members on Ebony. Councilmember Patton, are you interested in Ebony at all, or?
My main is Carnation, just for out dangers it gets.
Right.
But I guess my big concern was, once the street is built, how does it taper down into the sand when it does flood and when all the riprap does appear? Or is it just a street and it's just going to hang?
Well, are you speaking specifically about Carnation? The plan for Carnation is much the same as Palm Avenue. That's a vertical sheet pile seawall with a staircase. There would not be ADA access there. Part of the project, keeping in mind the project with Palm and Carnation, it was decided and approved that Palm would be the ADA access point for that area because it has ramps on both sides. You'll notice in the drawing, if I can go back up to it, it's not going very quickly, that one of the nods to the concerns about human intrusion, although that's not the way I would put it, but a lot of people walking and using the north area of North of Carnation as a de facto dog beach, and there was some concerns about the habitat areas, snowy plover nesting areas, was to take this staircase that you're about to see once I can get there, and instead of having it point this way, have it point to the south, so sort of directing people to the south. Whether that does anything, I doubt it, but that was one of the design considerations. But this would be a vertical seawall right here, and it would be a sheet pile seawall, so it would never become undermined. I shouldn't say never. The idea would be that it would not be undermined, similar to Date Avenue and Palm Avenue. And by the way, just another comment, if you don't mind. Given that this is a design exercise and it's focus the funds on the design, for the prioritization of priority, even if there's a developer that may come in and develop a hotel on the Munn property, similar to what happened with Pure South, is the agency designed that street at Date Avenue. We designed it, and I understand your concerns about how the seawall turned out, but we had the developer, and together we implemented that. So having a design in place does not necessarily mean we have to fund the construction, but the question is, does the council and does the community want to have control of that design rather than put that on the developer? So that's just a comment I had.
That's actually a really good point. So I just want to be clear on Ebony, since Councilmember Patton, you had mentioned, you had discussed this issue. So, but are you in favor of identifying Ebony as a priority?
Only so much. I think anything that comes up, even if the developer says, hey, we'd like to do this, it still needs to be approved.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So whether we design it or they design it, it has to be approved, and and it has to meet our needs and our criteria either way. So throwing that money to a spot that quite possibly might get designed on their end, how do you see it?
I think it's a good point. I think my argument would be that ultimately it might be to our benefit for the community to drive that design. So we have input, and we don't have this issue like with Date Street where we have we have an issue with seawall. I'm not sure if that would be something that they have to take in consideration if they have this design. I'm not sure on that.
If it's a design that is approved by the council and the port, I think they would do everything they would have to implement it. The design considerations that would come into play, and I understand Councilmember Patton's comments in part to mean that where is their vehicular access going to be for the project? Do we have a design that precludes where they want to put their vehicular access? Does it relate to whatever? We haven't seen a design for that proposed hotel, so there are some considerations. But if we had a design in place and we asked them to implement it, that would be the council's ability to do that. Yes.
Since there seems to be consensus, of the 3 council members, 2 out of 3 for Ebony, I'm willing to go along with that if Councilmember Patton is. With the consideration that maybe Elkwood, where I hung out as a kid, no, but honestly, I think it's the least attractive street along with Ebony. Maybe it's the second tier, along with Dahlia. I think so. Anyway, but I'm more than happy to support the Carnation, Descanso, and Ebony if Councilmember Patton's fine with that.
Yeah, I agree. Elkwood does get a lot of undermining as well. That's the other street that does get a lot of undermining. I just don't want to forget about our neighbors to the south, meaning South Seacoast.
Right. So, Councilmember Beck.
Thank you. So then would we be, if we're not going to be looking at Encanto as a top priority, would we be shifting the idea of restrooms into Descanso?
Not necessarily, no. I think that project would utilize its own considerations and design parameters, and if it lands at Encanto, there's nothing to say it can't be designed around those existing improvements, but there's also nothing to say that nothing preventing us from, there's already a concept or two presented, so I don't think it precludes the restroom going there.
Okay, so we kind of think of Encanto as almost its own standalone project, more or less?
Potentially. I mean, for the purposes of the port CIP, right now we're talking about the remaining street ends. It's hard to separate that other CIP, but because they're both in the CIP, I think it's fine to look at it that way.
Okay, so then we've got basically down to Carnation, just doing this for my mind, Carnation, Ebony, Descanso, and then almost as a second tier priority would be Elkwood and Dahlia, and then for the, I think it's the Dahlia street ends, bringing in our partner at ATS for some bus stop considerations as well. Is that correct? Does everybody else have?
Could we throw in Admiralty into that second tier only because it's one of the last remaining street ends with those wooden barricades? Any interest in that?
Well, I had raised the issue of Admiralty along because of it would be another street and close to that project.
All right, okay.
And then also across the street, bringing in, linking across the street, bringing in the estuary for potential improvements on that sidewalk and maybe a decking, an observation deck.
Okay, so right now, I'm gonna just restate this so I'm clear, we're all clear. There's consensus on Carnation, Ebony, and Descanso as the first tier priority. Carnation because of the public access and safety issues, Ebony because of all of the food issues and aesthetics, et cetera, and because of the need to have a community-driven and council-driven design before the hotel goes in, and then Descanso because of issues of access and public safety as well as flooding. Is that correct? Any other comments or? Yes.
My final comment is that this was a really good exercise for us because not only as a council, but as a staff and as a community, we looked at our street ends and we're left with the comment, we can do better than this. I mean, the barricades and the parking issues and just as a community and an up-and-coming community that's getting older, but we can certainly address these issues and do better with our street ends. Thanks.
Great, I just wanted to recognize our friends from the Port of San Diego, and is there any other additional comments?
No, I'm glad you said that because I wanted to point out that we have several members from the port in attendance, and I want to thank them as well. They've been great to work with on this project, as well as the South Seacoast initiating that project.
Okay, so to make sure we're clear on the procedures and priorities, I will make a motion. Is there a motion to entertain as a priority for street and improvements with the Port of San Diego and the City of Imperial Beach, Carnation, Ebony, and Descanso street ends? I was asking if you want to make that motion. Okay, great. All vote, please.
Mr. Mayor, can we have an oral vote since Briggs is absent?
Can we please take an oral vote? All in favor? Aye.
Motion carried unanimously by those present. Briggs is recused due to a potential conflict of interest.
I also wanted to acknowledge Wes Beaumier from the Navy as well, although he's here at, I think, most council meetings since the Navy was brought up, and this is something we've spoken. Carnation Street End is something I've spoken and staff spoken to him at length about over in this short time here. So.
Great, thanks for being here. Okay, now we move on to section 5.3, Port of San Diego Tidelands Activation Program FY 2015-2016 applications. And City Manager Hall will report on the item. And before we start, this is one of those items too. I think I'm going to have to do a chart. And we're going to have to do some consensus building and sort of prioritization. So, unfortunately, Councilmember Spriggs, it was a good exercise. It was very collegial, very consensus driven. So hopefully we can do the same thing, some sort of chart, and rank and prioritize what our interests are. So.
Yeah, and I'll keep this real short, but just to give you a little bit of background, each year the port has accepted applications and they grant sponsorships for projects or events or celebrations that will activate the Tidelands. And last year we did receive one of the sponsorships, and that was for our Symphony by the Sea. We had requested $25,000 for that event. We received $17,000. If you remember, the City Council actually asked staff to submit 2 applications. The second application was for the fireworks. The fireworks were not funded through the activation process, but the port did provide to us funding for our fireworks through another portion of their general fund. And so essentially, one of our projects was approved, one was not. I don't believe, to be fair, I don't believe that any community received any more than one of the applications. And so we should be clear that although the staff listed 7 different potential events that we could talk about, the likelihood of being funded for more than one event is probably not likely. And so we should probably narrow that down to maybe 1 or 2 high priorities for consideration. I happened to be at that meeting, and I can't count how many applications there were, but there was a room full of people asking for a very small amount of money. And I believe that even though the city only received one of our sponsorships, I think there were 6 or 7 in our community that received it, whether that be the Sun and Sea Festival, some chamber events. So there were a lot of events that so the board is very supportive of Imperial Beach. But a lot of those were private events and private sponsorships. So just wanted to kind of give the city council a little bit of the lay of the ground, of the land, and what happened last year. And then, as you can see in your binder, we had suggested that perhaps you consider the continuation of the Symphony by the Sea, perhaps fireworks, a cultural series where we might bring different events to the community. One thing I'll say is that a lot of the art that you see in our community is actually under the ownership of the port. So maybe putting together some kind of an art walk or something like that could be something that would be very beneficial to our community. We have an annual car show. We've talked about some surf contests. One of the things that was brought up is maybe a beach cruiser. You know, we have a lot of car shows, it seems like, in the area, but maybe a classic, where our whole goal here is classic Southern California, maybe a classic beach surfer or a beach cruiser. Some of those bicycles look pretty cool. Maybe have that kind of an event. So yeah, there you go. See, I got one vote already. And then there's a lot of other ideas. But essentially, we wanted to bring this to the council, see if you could come to a consensus on a priority, what you'd like for us to submit for sponsorships. Ron, does that cover it pretty much? Was that fair representation of kind of the way the process works? Yeah, maybe that'd be great to hear from Ron, who's very involved in that, can kind of give us some pointers on where we are this year.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council, Ron Powell, Port of San Diego. I think that was a fair representation. I think, though, too, that I would try to come up with no more than 3 because there are a lot of applicants for a fairly limited pool of money. But if you give us 3, that'll give us something to work with, and I think that we can come to some consensus at the port that will be amenable to you guys as well. So that's what I'm recommending. Good luck.
You're gonna need it.
Thank you. That concludes my report.
Councilmember Bragg.
Thank you. I have some questions. Am I addressing them to you, Mr. Hall?
Sure.
Okay. So I just want to get this clear in my mind. This is the city that is applying for funding. So we would be the hosting entity of these events. Is that correct?
Yes. What we're looking for tonight is that we would want to be a city-sponsored event. That is correct.
Okay. So we would host a car show.
Correct.
Okay. We would host these other events.
Whereas we support the Sun and Sea Festival, for example. You know, we're more of a we play a supporting role. This would be a city-sponsored and city function.
Okay, the reason why I asked that question, I just want to point out that some of these events are more labor intense, some are more resource intense than others. And so, having said that, I think we could eliminate some of them and maybe go back and maybe reassign them or ask other entities in the community to host them instead. Like our car show, you know, we have our South Bay Cruisers, and Public Safety Director Tom Clark is in the audience. Are we putting that on there? Was that their request that we assist them with that event, or would that take place of their event, or is that a consideration at all?
With Fun Harmon, we had a car show.
Right.
And with all the redevelopment going down Seacoast, we were able to pull that off. It was going to go to the Boys and Girls Club, and at the time, they weren't able to put that together. So we reached out to South Bay Cruisers and said, let's bring back a car show in Imperial Beach, and let's focus on classic Southern California woody environment. And they stepped up, and they said, we'll do that. We do some in-kind work for them as far as that, and then as a result, they gave a donation check, a very nice one, to the Boys and Girls Club.
So the $10,000, can you describe that budget to me?
I need to know what is it the manager's report?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Maybe I should.
The proposed request was for $10,000.
Well, what that would be meant to cover is any increase that we would have from the sheriff's department. It would be the cost personnel costs of actually putting on that event, not prizes or anything like that. They cover all their own costs. In fact, they pay to bring the car show to our community. And that's how they raise some of the funds for the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, car shows are very low impact as far as staff resource for us. They do most of the work, and it's state of public works as far as street closure. The rest of it's all on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that input because that was one of my thoughts in trying to decide which one of these I could support. My other considerations are what's the community benefit? How does the community benefit from these events? And, of course, I'm looking for a larger benefit for the majority of the community. In the past, we have had a surf contest here. We've had many surf contests here. One that comes to mind, Serge, Mayor, you might remember, we used to have the Bud Pro here years ago. That event lasted a week. It would start on Memorial Day, and then the finals were the following weekend. That was a huge event. Mr. Patton, you remember that one? That was a huge event. That was totally contained, though. That group put on that event. There was some impacts. Mr. Levine, I think this was before your time. There were some impacts to the community, but that was a huge event. It gained, it garnered us, and I think they might have had it 2 or 3 years in a row. They finally disbanded, and then we've had some other surf contests, BIA events. I'm not sure where Manny Vargas is on, he's planning on doing any events locally, but that always is a good attraction for our community, draws a lot of people. I'm not sure if we're envisioning a week-long surf contest or just a day long event.
Councilmember, I think there might have been confusion because I thought you had referred to the Wild Coast organization I puts on a surf contest, and we had not, to make this clear, we had not put that on. We had not made any request for that. So this is something that's independent of the surf contest we put on. Right?
Absolutely. The list that you have was to
Okay.
generate discussion.
Okay.
It is, should we be looking at maybe sponsoring a surf contest of any sort, an amateur, professional? Again, they weren't intended to be prioritized or anything else, but more to spur conversation.
Okay. And then I know we have a member of the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and I'm not sure that if they have any ideas of as far as, but their application would be different and separate from ours, is that correct?
Separate from ours at the same event.
Okay. In the past, we did have some cultural events. Mr. Patton and I both served on our Cultural Arts Board, and that was some of our ideas back then. That was many years ago, of concerts in the park and that type of thing. And the community benefit for those cultural events can be huge. As far as bringing revenue, and that's a consideration too. Are we looking at these events to bring revenue to our merchant sororities? Primarily, do we want them to be, like the symphony is really just, it's a wonderful cultural event, although you cannot say without a doubt that the businesses on Seacoast Drive do not benefit from it. We've all been to that event. We've all seen how they do benefit. So these are considerations that I have. For myself, fireworks is something that this community had begged for years and years and years. We've seen the results. We've seen what has happened. We've seen, that it's very, very well embraced by the community. I'm not sure that I don't know if I've thrown out a vote or support for any particular idea. I like them all. So maybe we could hear from some other council members. But I was just trying to put in a frame of reference how I was prioritizing and considerations that I had for them.
Councilmember Patton.
You made a lot of good points. The surf contest is good that you mentioned it was through Wild Coast. Although the one that Wild Coast does throw, it's a class act. But I would imagine one concern that you have, major, is water quality. You have all your eggs in a basket for that weekend. And that's kind of the reason I think we lost the pro, because it's hard to, the what ifs, so great. The symphony, fantastic idea. Fireworks, I think the fact that we have a group of people collecting money as we speak, trying to get this going, I think supplementing that is very crucial, because those people may not be around forever. And although it's very nice thing that they're doing, but I think chipping into that would be beneficial. The cultural series, fantastic. You know, you get a lot of communities, and they have a brochure. It's a sort of an art walk or famous sites in Imperial Beach, and you get that brochure, and it's almost like a, 15 places you can go to Imperial Beach. That brochure, 20 places, restaurants or little hidden gems in Imperial Beach, which we all know about. So those are my three top: is the symphony, fireworks, and cultural series, with fireworks being number one at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Spriggs.
Thanks. I agree with my colleagues on these priorities and all the comments up to now. I'm kind of curious as to how this works a little bit before I would state any priorities. For example, on fireworks, there's alternative port funding potentially available, as was the case last time. How sure are we that alternative port funding would be available for the upcoming fireworks, so we don't have to dip into this port activation request for that particular event? I don't know, maybe Mr. Powell, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you're used to that.
Yes. Ron Powell from the port. There is a possibility that you could have one signature event, and you could say maybe that's $25,000, and that would be your, even if you had several different events that you'd like to see the port finance, if that's your signature event and you make that your top priority, that's the one that we would look at versus 2 or 3 So each city can actually submit something that is their signature event, their #1 priority, and that one would be the one we would look at versus looking at 7. Because again, there's only so much money, and if that's the one that you really want, and we do tend to look at that one and not the others.
I'm actually trying to explore, and if it's a sensitive area, then please, Mr. City Manager or somebody tell me so, and I'll change the subject. The question is the Port Activation Fund versus other port sources of support.
Right.
And so the Port Activation Fund, I think, is what you're referring to as far as our top priority, our signature event, et cetera.
That's correct.
And then prioritizing things under that, and because we have a huge community effort to raise funds for fireworks, we would want to include that in a planned event for this coming summer. But the question is the funding source for the balance, in addition to the city resources. And I'm trying to understand what the alternative sources were that we're referring to, other than the Port Activation Fund from the port. And again, maybe there's a secret source of funds that we don't want to talk about, and if so, then just give me a hand signal. And,
Councilman Spriggs, what happened last year was, I think that it was very clear that the city of Imperial Beach went there with 2 very high priorities. One being the Symphony by the Sea, which is very highly supported by the port. I think everybody, even outside of our community, just loved that event and really wanted to see that come back. In the meantime, and the sensitivity of it, I think, is that with the Big Bay boom, the other cities around the bay are able to take advantage of the Big Bay boom, but Imperial Beach is somewhat removed from that. But that application for the Big Bay boom is not submitted by those cities. It is submitted by Mr. Purdon. And so he submits to the port, and so far the port has been very supportive as one of the sponsors of that. But because we're so far removed, he hasn't included us as part of the Big Bay boom. But the port wanted to make sure that the residents of Imperial Beach had that same experience on the 4th of July, and so they were willing to fund, and I believe it was right out of their general fund, they were willing to fund fireworks for our community to make sure that all the port cities had access to the fireworks, even though it was not included in Mr. Purdon's application, if you will. So whether or not the port would be willing to do that again, I don't know. I would hope so, but I don't know. But it was not funded through the port activation. It was funded, and I don't know if the secret handshake to the port either. But I know that it was not funded for port activation. They actually had to find some special funding for us. But it was a high priority to them last year because of equity, I think, more than anything else.
So, for my colleagues having the discussion here about priorities, this is really important. I mean, if we can be fairly assured that somehow the funds will be made available to do the fireworks, other than from the port activation fund, whether it's the port, whether it's the community raising additional money, whether it's the city kicking in for fireworks, whatever, then my thought would be that we wouldn't monopolize our top priority, $25,000 from the port activation fund for fireworks. That we would instead go, simply by the sea, which there's already, I think, a really good staff recommendation that we try to do that a couple years in a row and seek private sponsorship so we can move that also off of the port activation fund and bring some other activities in. So that's kind of, I think, where I'm coming out from this discussion is that I would not think we should include fireworks in the activation fund, but try to find another way. And Symphony by the Sea and the Cultural Series, both of which are enriching activities for the community and bring good quality visitors to the community and enhance the community's reputation as not only a surfing community and a great beach community, but also a community that appreciates the arts. So I think those would be at least two of the top ones that I would suggest, and I'm not sure, what would come beyond those.
Councilor Spriggs, you kind of asked also how that process works. Just so the council knows, what happens is that each one of the cities, and then I think some of the other organizations, are allowed to have a representative that meets with port staff, and they sift through the different applications and they try to rank those in a way that they have some criteria of activating the tidelands, community benefit, all the things that we've been talking about. And essentially, there's certainly a lot more applications than there is funding, and there just comes a cutoff point where they run out of money and they fund everything above that. For instance, last year in our application, we put $25,000 down for Symphony by the Sea. In order to fund a few projects, they actually reduced that to $17,000, and so there is some changing of those applications to try and fund as many as they can and be as equitable as they can. If the council was so inclined to go down that path, if you wanted us to in that application, we could indicate that fireworks are high priority, and if they need to come through port activation, then that's high priority. But if there are other funding sources, we would. I think obviously we're talking about two signature events, if you will, the fireworks and Symphony by the Sea, and then see if there's some additional for funding for some of these smaller events that are happening. But I don't have the answer, and it is kind of a scary proposition. I don't have the answer of whether or not there is alternative funding. To answer your question more directly, I do not have an answer whether there's alternative funding for the fireworks. I don't know.
So what happened last year? The way it got funded this year, there's no certainty. You're saying that will be replicated again this time around.
Yeah, I'm unaware that they have they did not make any commitment to us that they would do that again this year. I don't know the answer to that.
Councilmember Bilbray?
Yeah, I changed my mind.
Any further? So I just wanted.
You want to go first?
No, I was trying to see. I'm marking. I have a little chart, and I'm I'm missing everybody's top 3 comments. So anyway.
I appreciate your organization as a teacher. So, and being, I think it's very, very admirable. But I'm kind of listening to Mr. Spriggs about the fireworks. And when fireworks came up at the last meeting, it kind of sounded like the volunteers were going to gather as much as they possibly could, and we were going to pony in the rest and get this done for this year. If that's the case, then I agree with Mr. Spriggs that we move to something more cultural based. Does that mess up your chart? If that's the case.
All right. Well, Councilmember Bragan.
After listening to Mr. Spriggs and then Manager Hall's response, I'm leaning more towards we need the more surety of funding from the activation grant then. I mean, it's a crapshoot, you know, it's a gamble. Like, well, I will take it off that list and hope that, you know, the court will fund this rather than submitting the request and maybe, you know, we'll have to they'll split the dollars and we'll get 12.5 for one and 12.5 for another. I'm not sure if we'll get 25 for both of them, but I'm not that much of a gambler, although. Laughing at a little side joke. I would feel more assured if we were submitting concrete requests for that, the fireworks funding. You know, God love them, and they need all the help they can get. But you know, fundraising efforts they're hard. And, you know, the high benchmark dollar that we're asking our iHeartRD to achieve. I'm not sure that they're going to attain that. So I would much rather have a sure thing. Not that the grant is, you know, a sure thing, but I'm leaning the exact opposite of you guys.
She's about to contribute $25,000.
Yeah. Chief Clark, do you have a comment?
Yes, if I may. I think there's one major event that you forgot about, is the Sun and Sea. And that event is an iconic event for Imperial Beach.
Worldwide.
Whether it's called Sandcastle or Sun and Sea or whatever it is, it was brought back last year. The port has, through activation money, given them a 3-year contract, and it was a reduced funding contract. I do not know if that's a way for them to go back in on their own to then reapply, or if it's all on the volunteers trying to raise money for that event. So that's one you might want to think about as well.
I have that in my notes
Thank
to
you.
mention, and it's good that the chief brought that up. I believe that there are iconic events that the city should back up. The city should stand for these. We're going to have them, period. If we can get the money, just like a lot of other things, streets, whatever. If we can get the money from a grant or from citizens' voluntary effort or from the port or other funding sources, fine. But there are just certain things we need the certainty that we are going to do as a community, and the city is going to back those up and work with each unique event in terms of its funding and behind it, and how it works, etc. But we're going to back it up and we're going to make sure it happens. I think fireworks and Sun and Sea are good examples of things that need to happen every year with everybody being sure. We calendar them, we promote them. It's going to happen. It's not this report come through or will the community fundraisers come through, etc. We'll be working on it as best they can. But we need to stand behind it and make sure that it's going to happen. Therefore, if that's what we're going to do, we're going to say we'll put some of our reserves against these items if we fall short on the fundraising effort, wherever those funds are going, because these are iconic to Imperial Beach, and it's worth putting those backing them up with those resources, underwriting them if necessary. I'm scared of what I'm saying. Then we can concentrate on the cultural areas for port funding, et cetera. And to me, that's, we certainly, as the report makes clear, the port funded Symphony previously. Staff is suggesting that we ask the port to fund Symphony by the Sea again this time around. That's, we've got to decide on that one, because that may not happen again, because it doesn't have the groundswell of community fundraising and other sources. So it's really the port activation for that one. So if we want to give that enough legs so that it's going to have momentum for someone to raise money for it in the future privately, we needed another year of that. And to me, that therefore ought to be right at the top of our list. And if it doesn't take $25,000, then other cultural events ought to be, speaking strictly about what we asked the port for from activation funds, the cultural series ought to be number 2. And, you know, if we can work out getting funds for fireworks and Sun and Sea through other sources, then fine, because both of those are going to probably, you know, eat up a lot more than what the port could do together, funding them together anyway. So that's the way I would approach this.
Thank you, Councilmember Patton. I'm sorry, Bill Bray. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, actually, I'm in agreement with you, Mr. Spriggs. You're absolutely right.
So unusual.
Yeah, Symphony by the Sea would be my priority, and then Cultural Walk, and then fireworks. I have full faith of iHeartIV in fundraising for this year. Might be a different story next year, but at this time I do have full confidence in them to raise that money for the 4th of July fireworks.
So I just want to make sure your consensus was your choice of Symphony and the cultural series, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it looks like we have some consensus here. Just want to make sure I got all the little X's and yes. So at least the consensus is on 2 out of the 3, the Symphony by the Sea and the cultural series. Everyone is in agreement that the fireworks is a priority, but with the exception of Councilmember Bragg, we thought that we could actually put that in a separate box and really pursue funding through other potential sources for that, the port, the city, or other private means. Is that? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, that was,
So, first of all, could there be consensus that we identify the Symphony by the Sea and the cultural series as our top choices, and that we recognize that the fireworks is a priority, and that we as a council will work with the staff on the port to pursue every means necessary in partnership with the community and the private sector to make sure those are fully funded. And I think that we should be able to working with our port commissioners as well to make that very clear that in terms of equity and also in this fairness and also air quality and potentially impacts to our South Bay refuge, we probably don't want thousands of people crowding the south end of the bay or driving to Coronado to see the port's fireworks show, that it makes more sense on an environmental level, a safety level, and an equity level to have fireworks here in the Big Bay Boom in Vero Beach that comes from that same funding source. So that's an argument I think we can have a very powerful time of making. Yeah, Councilmember Patton.
Mr. Bell mentioned that we make one of those the premier one.
Right,
and
okay.
Others would fall to the side a little, but if we made a premier one, they wasn't that one closer. Is that correct?
that's right.
Okay, so it seemed to me that there was consensus that Symphony by the Sea was the premier. Is that fair to say? And then it seemed to me that the consensus was that the cultural series was the number 2, with the caveat that we're going to be strongly pushing our horse number 3 fireworks from a potential different source. And we all commit to supporting that, no matter what? Okay, so is there a motion? First of all, thank you very much. I grew up with the Symphony. My father's here, and he dragged me to every free cultural event in Southern California when I was a kid. And I would hope that, including symphonies, we had great memories of Symphony by the Sea, and then also the cultural series. I looked at the Coronado one, and I'd love to get the Marine and Navy bands back here. I grew up listening to those bands. I think they mean a lot to this community. So
We actually looking at the Marine Corps All-Star Jazz Band, which is one of the best jazz bands in the country. They have a singer that sounds like Frank Sinatra, so just things like that would be great. So anyway, is there a motion? Could we entertain a motion that we identify Symphony by the Sea as the #1 priority? Number 2 would be cultural series, and then with a caveat, I'm not sure how we bring that, but the fireworks is something that we will pursue as well, but potential different funding source. All right, is there a vote on that? Did that work? Do an oral vote?
Councilmember Patton, please vote.
There we go.
Motion carried unanimously.
Great. I want to thank you guys for a very collegial and consensus-driven approach. Thank you. All right, now we have our favorite part of the evening, the IB Redevelopment Agency Successor Agency Reports. We have item 6.1, adoption of resolution number SA-1546 of the Imperial Beach Redevelopment Agency Successor Agency, approving the administrative budget for the period of July 1, 2015 through December 31st, 2015, and related actions. Assistant City Manager Wade will report on that.
Thank you, Chair and members of the successor agency. It's that time of year. It's two times we get to do this every year. This administrative budget is due with the next item, which is our recognized obligation payment schedule, by March 3rd of this year. Essentially, it sets up our administrative budget for the successor agency staff by a formula in the Dissolution Act, the legislation that dissolved redevelopment agencies. Our administrative budget is basically based upon a total amount of enforceable obligations on a recognized obligations payment schedule. The minimum amount that an agency can get, and it's at 3% of those total enforceable obligations. The minimum amount is $250,000 per fiscal year, and so the 6-month administrative budget is typically $125,000. Which this administrative budget is. It's included as an attachment to the resolution. We're asking for your support of that. I will say that the Oversight Board, if approved, the Oversight Board would then have to approve it as well and forward it to the Department of Finance. The Oversight Board can, if it's necessary or they believe it's necessary, can reduce that amount if they so choose. At this point in the dissolution process, we're still spending those funds every 6 months, so we're not recommending decreasing it. It's the minimum amount, both the minimum and maximum amount that we can receive, and for that reason, we're requesting approval of Resolution SA-1546, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Councilmember Spriggs.
Thanks, Mr. Wade. Because of the way we allocate the administrative expense to a number of important staff members in the city, not the least of which is yourself, how long is this going to be able to be extended as far as the dissolution process and the ability to put administrative expenses at this level into the ROC, etc.?
Well, it's going to be a while. Now, what the Dissolution Act says is that, and we have our own. Every agency has its own oversight board. The Dissolution Act says that in 2016, we're supposed to go to a county-wide oversight board. That may change the dynamic in which that oversight board, which has less to do with our community, may start taking a closer look at administrative costs. At this point, they're not doing that because dissolution is still relatively new. We will continue to do a recognized obligation payment schedule every 6 months, although the governor, part of his budget is proposing maybe going to an annual ROCs, which may or may not be a benefit to us. In some ways it would, in some ways it may not. But we have bond debt now out through 2033, so we'll have a recognized obligation payment schedule, whether it's a final, and the other thing they're proposing is doing an annual ROPS and then maybe allowing agencies to do a last and final, which means we would turn in our bond debt service schedule and say, we need this money until 2033 to pay it. We also need administrative costs, probably at a decreasing schedule, so that over time the amount of administrative costs will go down. So at this point, for the foreseeable future, at least, and then the other thing that I'm sorry that they're also looking at is extending the deadline where we go to a countywide success or countywide oversight board. So we may get another year before we go to a countywide oversight board. The DOS finding that there's still a lot of agencies that haven't done all their. I mean, we got approved for everything quite a long time ago, the finding of completion and all our audits and whatnot. There's agencies that still don't have those complete. So it's hard to speculate, but I would say for the next few years at least, I'd say next 2 or 3 years we'd still be asking for this amount roughly, especially given the fact that the Ninth and Palm project is still going to be going on. We've got other projects that the Byway Village potentially will still be going on, so other projects that we'll be working on as an agency, as well as some other bond-funded capital projects.
Thanks, Mr. Wade.
Any other comments or concerns, questions? Okay, so I would like, can we continue on with the entertaining motion? I would like to entertain a motion to adopt resolution number SA 1546 of the Imperial Beach Redevelopment Agency successor agency, approving the administrative budget for the period of July 2015 through December 31st, 2015, and related action. So I have a motion. Please vote. Did we record that?
Motion carried unanimously.
Great, thank you. And now we'll move on to item 6.2, adoption of resolution number SA 1547 of the Imperial Beach Redevelopment Agency successor agency, approving and adopting the recognized obligation payment schedule for the period of July 1, 2015 through December 31st, 2015, and approving and recommending to the Oversight Board the reallocation of $24,861 of redevelopment property tax trust funds. So, Assistant City Manager Wade will report on the item.
Thank you, Chair Dedina. This is, as I mentioned, the recognized obligation payment schedule, which is due by March 3rd. Nothing too out of the ordinary for this, other than noting that we don't have to ask for bond debt service payments. We were approved for all our bond debt service payments for this year and received them on January 3rd. Another thing that I'd like to point out is, although I reported, I think at the last council meeting, about the city loan repayment, the original first payment, and it's based on a formula. Basically, you have the first year we were an agency, a successor agency, 2012-13. Whatever that was distributed to other taxing entities, a total amount called the residual redevelopment property tax trust fund. The difference between what we earn in the current fiscal year and that amount, if you take 50% of that, that's what you can get paid back. The first time we got paid back, we had zero in the first year, so we're always going to be subtracting zero. The first year, the first payment was about $1.1 million, it's noted here. We actually got, in this current fiscal year, the residual amount total distributed was almost $3 million, and so half of that is $1,146,224. So the requested loan payment has gone up by about $30,000 for this ROPS period. So that's good news. It's not a huge jump, but my guess is a year from now, when we ask for the repayment, given the amount of the decrease in enforceable obligations, we may be able to get the whole amount repaid in one more go. So that's pretty good news. But other than that, there's nothing too exciting to report. We're asking for about $1.4 million of enforceable obligations. I do want to make note of an error that was discovered after we put these together. There's a website that you can, when the DOF, they take them all electronically now, and so you can validate the ROPS, this spreadsheet. You just plug it in, and it'll tell you what you need, what you missed. And on the cash balances, which is, I don't even know what page it is, it's like the 4th page, there's just one column that we need to enter in, and if you can find the cash balances, it would be under H1. And there's an amount that we, based on our audit and our financial records, we had about $18,000, $18,029 of cash that needs to be listed there. It'll change one of these numbers, but it won't change anything substantive in the ROPS. And really, that's about the only thing I need to report. The other thing I wanted to mention is that what you're required to do every year, every 6 months rather, is reconcile the prior 6-month period. So for this ROPS, which is for July through December, we're asking for money to fund these enforceable obligations. We have to go back and tell the DOF and the county auditor controller the money they gave us for the last period, which was July to December of 2014, what money we were given and how much of that we spent. And if we didn't spend it all, that's called a prior period adjustment. They'll subtract that amount, whatever we didn't spend, from what they give us in June for the next 6 months. The idea being that it should already be in our successor agency bank account, so we didn't spend it. We didn't spend a lot of money on one of the items. It's litigation associated with an affordable housing advocates or coalition, sorry, of San Diego County that's filed a lawsuit against the state and every agency in San Diego County about affordable housing monies. We didn't spend a lot of that money. We only spent, I think, out of the $60,000 they gave us, we spent about $5,300. So there's a large chunk of money there. However, we overspent for the Ninth and Palm project what we got. So what we're asking the Oversight Board to do, and we've done it in this resolution approving it, is authorize us to use the money we didn't spend on that one item. I think it's $24,000, allocated to the Ninth and Palm project. So we're going to be asking the Oversight Board to adopt a separate resolution authorizing or making that authorization so that the prior period adjustment that we get isn't going to be as substantial. So right now, for example, the prior period adjustment is about $71,664. They theoretically could not give us in June. That would go down by about $25,000. So that's something that's in this resolution that we're asking your support for. So that I'd just like to ask for adoption of the resolution. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Are there any questions? Thank you for that report. Are there any questions or comments? Councilmember Brock.
Thank you. Mr. Wade, thank you for that explanation, because I did have it highlighted in my staff report to ask you about that. But let's talk about the city loan repayment for just a moment. Tell us where that money goes. Does it have a designated use?
I'm glad you asked that, because pursuant to the Dissolution Act, any loan repaid to the city that formed the agency, that amount, whatever amount you get, 20% of that amount has to go into your agency's low and moderate income housing fund. So when we got $1.115 million last June, roughly $892,000 went to the general fund, the city, and about $224,000 went to the low and moderate income housing fund. You, I believe, this council in September, I think I wasn't here for that council meeting, allocated those funds, the city general funds, to various capital reserves. The other money went to our low and moderate income housing fund. The Dissolution Act is very specific about what we can use that for, and it's really about creating affordable housing. So $200,000 isn't going to do much for a project. So we're going to have to wait until maybe this next loan payment when we put 20% in and use those funds to leverage potentially other grant funds. There's a lot of affordable housing money out there. Actually, there's a grant application funding notice of availability on the streets right now. So that's the idea, is we try to maybe work with something like a Habitat for Humanity organization, maybe do a small infill project here or there. Ginger Hitsky, by the way, I wanted to mention, she's the developer who did the Post project. That project won what's called a Ruby Award this last week, which is for the outstanding affordable housing project under 50 units in the state. So that was pretty huge. But in any event, so that's where the money goes. Whatever the general fund money goes, assuming we get the payment, it's really at the discretion of the council where we put those funds.
As far as the housing, is there any way, if a project were to come in front of us, any way of borrowing into the future from that, or not?
It's too speculative. I mean, the DOF could change. They're changing legislation right now. There's a lawsuit going on with our neighbor to the north, and they prevailed. In two instances, they prevailed, and the response by the DOF is, okay, we'll change the law. So we don't know what could happen. I don't think they're going to come after that. The cases where loan repayments aren't being repaid is when cities have asked for interest, like large sums of interest, and we haven't asked for any interest, and so they've been pretty good about it. So I don't see. I mean, it's just an unknown, so it's not worth counting on.
I thought that was going to be a response, but thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Councilmember Spriggs?
I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you, Mr. Wade, for all of your hard work on this redevelopment dissolution and aftermath. You and others on the city staff and our legal counsel have just done a tremendous job in keeping Imperial Beach kind of in front of the wave on all of this, and we're indebted to your hard work and smarts in this whole process. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? I wanted to echo that. I think at the League of Cities training we did with Councilmember Bragg, they emphasized this is probably the most complicated issue in the entire state. So yeah, I think the city of Beach has done a great job, and you guys have done a great job being ahead of the curve. So thank you for those comments. All right, so we do have a motion. I would like to entertain a motion to adopt resolution number SA-15-4047 of the Imperial Beach Redevelopment Agency successor agency approving and adopting the recognized obligation payment schedule for the period of July 1, 2015 through December 31st, 2015, and approving and recommending to the Oversight Board the reallocation of $24,861 of redevelopment property tax trust funds. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Okay. We have a vote, please.
Councilmember Patton? Motion carried unanimously.
Great, thank you. And now we have items pulled from the consent calendar, and that is item 2.2, adoption of ordinance 2015-1149, amending section 10.36.025 of the Imperial Beach Municipal Code related to the prohibition of the use of streets for habitation. So,
Mayor and Council, maybe I can just summarize this a little bit. We already have an ordinance in our books that defined a lot of the things we're talking about tonight. And it was mentioned earlier, there was a recent lawsuit in the city of Los Angeles, and the judge made clear that there needed to be some clarifications in ordinances such as these. Our ordinance, as was stated tonight, was very similar to the city of Los Angeles. And so what we did is we simply updated our ordinance to be consistent with the changes that were suggested in the legal case. Essentially, though, what we're talking about here tonight is that on occasion there are people who may take up domicile in front of a home where they're not welcome, or they're, again, to have someone living in the street in front of your house, if that's maybe not something that we would want to entertain for some of our residents and whatnot. But the reality is that we didn't change the ordinance very much. We made minor modifications as were necessary in order for our ordinance to remain enforceable. I don't know if the city attorney wants to add to that, but again, I think you can see in your report, I think we basically changed 3 or 4 words in our ordinance just to make sure that it was clear. But feel free if you need to add to that.
No, the city manager has summed up the amendments.
Before there's any council comment, is there any additional public comment? We heard public comment on this issue at the public comment period. Is there any additional public comment that you'd like to make? If so, please put a blue card.
I have to put in another one. I
Okay.
have one in.
Well, is there any comments from the council? Oh, you did, okay. Is this a new one? Okay, so we do have a comment from Brenda Wallace. Would you like to speak again then?
Sure.
I'd just like clarification. I was arrested on January 4th that this was adopted by the sheriff's department, so it's not permanent yet.
Let me explain. I apologize. I should have done this earlier after, when the mayor asked me to talk to you. The sheriff and the sheriff's deputies are not under the jurisdiction of the city council. I will raise this issue with our lieutenant that is in charge of our station. I should have said that earlier. I apologize. Yeah, they have no authority over the sheriff or their actions. I will definitely talk to them and find out what the issue is.
And so the homelessness issue is really something for me from 13th to Seacoast. And like I said, if you ask somebody not park in front of it, not do domicile, be respectful, pick up after yourself. If you're in a situation where it's temporary, you're trying to get on your feet, what you're telling me is that the city of Imperial Beach is not homeless friendly. Basically, I have a vehicle. I have a vehicle,
Okay.
so I'm much more fortunate than a lot of these people out here. So what you're saying is that I'm not allowed to be in my vehicle to stay safe, to stay warm.
That's not what I said.
That's what the ordinance says.
That's not what the ordinance says.
It does.
That's not what the ordinance says. But if that's your understanding of the ordinance, you're certainly entitled to that.
Well, that's how it was enforced to me, is that you're not allowed to sleep in your vehicle on ID.
I'm simply unfamiliar with your case. I don't know what happened in your case. What I will tell you is that you asked me if I'm saying that Imperial Beach is homeless unfriendly. That's not what the ordinance says.
It's not homeless unfriendly, but if you're homeless and have a vehicle, you're unfriendly. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have any city council comments? Councilmember Cotton.
I think I brought this up last time, and I mentioned, when I was growing up, I'd have relatives come, grandparents and uncles, and they'd have a motorhome occasionally, and they would stay in front of your house, and I haven't heard of any problems with that, but I would hate to see somebody, some grandmother, grandfather, or uncle come up and say, I've got cited, and so I think that if that does happen, that we have the option to revisit this. Sure. Right now, it's fine the way it is, but I think there is a problem down the road with this, which I haven't heard. Make sure. That's one concern.
Mayor and council always have the option to revisit the ordinance issue.
Are there any other comments or questions? All right, make sure I go back to read this. So is there a motion to adopt ordinance number 2015-1149?
Second.
Please vote. Great, thank you.
Motion carried unanimously.
We're going to adjourn the regular meeting, but just wanted to announce that the City Council will have a retreat that was scheduled for Wednesday, February 18th, 2015 in the Dempsey Holder Safety Center at 6 p.m. And with that, we announce that the regular meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
I already